Um, I think I have done the usual like information fire hose. So there's kind of plenty of information there to kind of consider in the back of your mind. These things might not be immediately things to do immediately, but one thing to consider is we've been talking a lot about using Wikidata for like open citation, like an equivalent, like a free version of Google Scholar, a free version of Crossref, a free version of Web of Science. But you'll notice that, you know, all of these concepts, like main subjects, there's concepts about these things. So name me one of the diagnostic tools for bipolar.
Oh, you want me to name one?
Yeah, give me the name of a diagnostic tool for bipolar and see if there's a Wikidata item about it.
General behavior inventory.
It's going to require me to spell behavior correctly before it's going to do that.
American way.
And maybe it's going to want it Bior.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So it's found a couple of articles about it, but it's also found the item itself. And so all it knows about the GBI is it's an instance of a psychological test and it's an instance of a behavioral assessment. Doesn't know anything else about it. Doesn't know that it's related in any way to bipolar disorder or anything else. Doesn't know how it works. Doesn't know anything. But I could, again, go back to Sparkle and ask the question of, well, I would like, tell me all of the examples of psychological tests that exist in Wikidata. Query Wikidata, and I can say, yep, find me all of the behavioral tests, the psychological tests. Oops, screw back up, can't remember what I did. Show me all the psychological tests. Go. Here we go. Here are all the psychological tests: the concentration performance test, the fear questionnaire, the hypomania checklist, the mood disorder questionnaire. And we can then go and look at these different items and see how well they're described. I suspect similarly poorly. Oh, this one's slightly better. So it says this is an instance of a psychological test. Oh, its main subject is mood disorders. Okay, yeah, that's slightly better. It's got a low-ink ID. It's got a Microsoft Academic ID. No idea if those are the relevant IDs to add, but you can add various other identifiers. Fear questionnaire, even worse. Concentration performance test, even worse. What's the most famous of all? Oh, Briggs-Meyer. That's surely got a better descriptor. Is this the Briggs-Meyer? Nope. Briggs-Meyer. Okay, this has got a bit more description about it. Now we know this is a psychological test, that it was named after Briggs and Meyer. We know that it's based on psychological types. We know that it has an official website. Has a commons category, it's got a main topic category, it's got a Freebase ID and a Microsoft Academic ID, it's discussed on Quora, it's got a Rational Wiki ID, it's got its own subreddit, TV tropes, it's in KDpedia. But so you can kind of see how it's trying to describe this item a bit more, but you can see how there's way more information that could be added to this about how it's working, how it's operating, what it's used for, what methodology it itself is using. Like, I mean, Briggs-Myers is basically just a questionnaire, right? Like, I don't know if it's using any statistics behind at the back end, but you could also say that it, let's say that it uses somewhere in the back end, it's using a student t-test. So yeah, you could say, okay, well, it's actually, as part of it, it is using the student's t-test, and we could then at some later stage, once all of this is nicely described, ask the question here in the Wikidata query service, well, tell me all of the instances of psychological tests that use this particular statistical framework behind the scenes because I want to know, all of the tests for bipolar disorder that use this statistical framework. But I'd also like to know all of the tests for, I don't know, just plain old vanilla depression that use the same statistical framework, or that were developed by an academic working at the same institution, or who were developed by an academic who was later had their license to practice revoked for misconduct, or which were developed by an academic whose work is all funded by a pharmaceutical company that recommends the use of their pharmaceutical products for this particular as an intervention for this particular mood disorder. So you can start to build up really complex queries, like with that Bristol Myers. Let's imagine that it's for mood disorders, and it turns out that both Briggs and Myers were funded by the same, GlaxoSmithKline, who had just developed the new who had just developed, the latest pharmaceutical product for mood disorders and had paid them to develop this test. And lo and behold, everyone who takes this test is recommended this particular pharmaceutical.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Like, obviously that's an extreme scenario, but you can see how you're kind of bringing this up. Or maybe this test was first published by, when I typed this in, it said that this was first described in, this article. Oh, yeah, it's described about a whole range of articles. So let's say it was first described in the article, and that article had the peer reviewer, and that peer reviewer was a previous student of both Catherine Briggs and Isabel Myers. So we can now see, oh, well, the person who peer reviewed this has a conflict of interest that maybe was disclosed, maybe wasn't disclosed. Or every time Joe Bloggs peer reviews Catherine Briggs's work, it gets through peer review really well, and vice versa. Every time Catherine Briggs peer reviews Joe Bloggs's work, it gets through peer review really smoothly, because they have a little secret agreement with one another that they just peer review each other's work, and they always put each other as recommended reviewer, and they've got like a little network going between them. And maybe that's totally fine, because they are both the experts on each other's work. Or maybe there's something underhanded going on, and we could detect that somewhere in the network.
Wow. Wow.
So this is kind of where the power of Wikidata starts to come in, and the psychological aspects of Wikidata are really poorly described. But I'll tell you what, the pharmaceutical aspects are incredibly well described. If I put in paracetamol, or acetaminophen, isn't it? Can I spell paracetamol? Yes, I can. Acetaminophen. There we go. So here is the Wikidata item for acetaminophen, a common drug for pain and fever. Here are all of its possible aliases. So these are all of the different names that paracetamol is sold under. It's an instance of a chemical compound, of a medication, of an essential medication. It is a non-opioid analgesic and antipyretic. It's part of it is part of the response to paracetamol. It has the role in this thing of reactant. Here's its chemical structure. Here's an image of some paracetamol. This just depicts a sample of crystalline paracetamol. It has this particular mass. It's got this particular chemical formula. It's got this chemical formula in smiles. It's got this melting point. Interestingly, we don't exactly know its melting point. It's stated as 170 by this. It's stated as 163 by this. In fact, the same data set lists it as having two different melting points. Interesting. There needs to be some greater description of that. It's an activator of this particular, I'm guessing this is a neuroreceptor. Let's have a look. Yes, this is a protein coding gene for, for collagen type 3, okay. But yeah, so it's an activator of this. It's a key ingredient in Tylenol. It treats the medical condition hypothermia, pain, influenza, nasopharyngitis. Like, you can see how much significant drug interactions, particularly relevant for psychoactive compounds within the psychological world if we're talking about treating bipolar disorder through through pharmaceutical interventions. The significant drug interactions are going to be pretty important. Interestingly, we've got references for some of these. We've got no reference that paracetamol has a significant interaction with this particular compound. No reference for that whatsoever. Physically interacts with the prostaglandin synthase and blah, blah, blah. Like routes of administration. Apparently, you can take it rectally. And like we're less than halfway down this Wikidata item page, so you can see the extreme depth that you can go into with these things. For pharmaceutical compounds, we have incredibly in-depth descriptions for them, and I suspect that the same is going to be the case. How did this happen? I think that I'm just going to view the history and see when this started being created. So so some of it's being manually added by like Charles Matthews. He's a guy at Cambridge who I know who added the mesh tree code, and he did this manually. But there's a whole load of bots doing this. So GZW bot added something. SCL dude added something with another bot. Oh, so this is someone. When it names a batch item, you can see that this was done via quick statements. So it was done via Tool Labs quick statements. So they've probably got taken some massive database somewhere and converted it into CSV and then batch uploaded it through quick statements and integrated it all through that way.
I wondered like how much of this could be mined from patent filings or the physician's desk reference or.
Yeah, I actually do not know. Let's go for a psychoactive one. Escitalopram. There we go. There's two different items for that. They should probably be merged. Are they talking about the same thing? I'm pretty sure that they are. Escitalopram, antidepressants, SSRI. Lexapro, pharmaceutical product, has active ingredient escitalopram. Okay, so Lexapro has got something. Okay, interesting. So someone has, for this thing, it's talking about different instances of the same drug class. So escitalopram is already reasonably well described. Medical conditions treated, and we've got references for all of those. So yeah, this will probably also indicate where this information has all been extracted from. I suspect someone has gone through the drug indications, whatever this database is, and has written and has basically converted it into a big table to put into quick statements to import it all in one go.
And is the condition treated, does it have to have an indication, or if people routinely use it off-label for something, would that also be appropriate?
So long as there is a reference for it, yes. So let's. Interesting. Is there a particular drug that is really well known for off-label use? Like everyone knows that this drug is used off-label all the time for this specific thing.
Yes. I'm trying to think of what would be a really, like I'm spacing all of the, oh yeah, of course. What would be a really good example? Well, benadryl as a sleep aid. I don't think that has an FDA indication for it, but.
All right, let's go to the Q item for benadryl. All right, we've again got two different items for this. I'm just going to open up both of them So this is acrovastine, and this is diphenyl
the one I would think of.
hydramine. Is that this? Okay. Why did this one come up for Benadryl when I searched for it? Do not know. Oh well, let's ignore that for the moment. All right. Diphenyl hydramine, it's an instance of this, blah, 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 and has its chemical structure, side effects, medical condition treated. All right. So it is saying it is used for insomnia, and it's pulling it from this. But this is did you say this is an off-label use?
I thought it was, but maybe not. So if it's
I mean, so let's say it was. One of the things that we could do is edit this item and add a qualifier, and it suggested things. Oh, lovely! It's approved by this thing. Da, da, da. So I will probably say this is an instance of off-label use. Specifically, the use of pharmaceutical drugs or vaccines in an unapproved indication concerning the treatment of a particular disease or condition as designated by a regulatory agency. That is a horrible definition of off-label use, but gets the idea across. So yeah, we could then start, we could then tag these items by which ones are off-label uses and which ones aren't.
So it's over the counter. So it doesn't, in the United States, it would not need an indication.
Hmm.
The
Okay.
Oh, we're attacking the problem different ways. I'm in Google and you're on Wiki.
Yeah, I'm just on Wikipedia seeing if there's like a famous example of off-label use that it's going to use. But what was the point of that? Yeah, the point is that you can definitely easily encode into Wikidata which of these medical conditions treated are being done in an off-label use sort of a way, and you can of course then do a really lovely Sparkle query eventually for tell me all of the drugs that are used in an off-label manner for this particular medical condition, and it'll tell you all the off-label ones, all of the on-label ones. And you could even say this started being used to treat insomnia off-label. Start time, it's only started being used in 2018 or whatever. And in fact, it was then found that it was a terrible idea. End time, 2019. And you could then say also has effect.
The indications are going to be different depending on the country and the regulatory body. So there are things that are approved in Canada, but not the US. There are things that are approved or indicated in the EU, and not.
Yeah, you definitely can. I can't remember exactly how you code that in, but I think that you would say there's definitely a way to say valid in place. Here we go. This statement is valid in Canada. And then we would say, make another item for insomnia off-label use started in 2016 in the United States, ended in 2019 due to death or whatever. Actually, probably side effect will be more useful. Has side effect. Yeah, death. There we go. So this is how I would encode up that information that it was for a while used for the treatment of this medical condition.
All right. So if you want to see whether someone has done a fairly comprehensive workup like that, we could look up thalidomide.
Oh yes, that's a perfect example. I remember I had to do an essay about thalidomide back in my undergraduate years from a biochemistry point of view and how it affected the regulatory world. Yeah, thalidomide, chemical compound, blah, 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 blah. Now let's see, active ingredient, medical condition treated. All right,
There's
so we've
leprosy.
just got pretty bland statements. Yep. Yep. Now, okay, it is in the pregnancy category, Australian category X. Yep, do not give this to pregnant people. Has role, leprostatic agent. Do not exactly understand what that means in this context.
It's one of the things that it's why it still is manufactured. It's one of the, it has an indication for treatment of leprosy still. It's one of the few things that's helpful.
And so currently its only indication that it causes thalidomide is down in this subject has role leprostat. Oh wait, no. What's the name of the condition? I can't actually remember what the name of the condition is of when someone has
no arms or legs or
look it up. It'll be in the common side effects. Well, it's not really okay. Results in malformation of limbs. That's the one. So let's see. I don't really mean the congenital disorder. That's the one that it's probably talking about anyway, but it's referring to it only as a congenital disorder, which is not really the case when we're talking about it with reference to
the result here teratogenic.
Yeah, this is something rather. This is a specific type of phlectomyia. So actually, really, we probably want two different items. The thalidomide scandal has its own entire Wikipedia page, which does not surprise me. And I'm guessing that the Wikidata item for that might be, okay, here we go. This is the thing that we're thinking of. Phocomelia due to thalidomide. Yes, instance of a scandal, instance of a malformation syndrome, subclass of these things, and surely it has caused by. It does not. Well, we can definitely fix that. So symptoms, yes, fair enough. Main subject thalidomide, not really. Probably cause is the more significant one. And in fact, specifically, we should say enantiomer. There'll be a clever way to, in some way, specify that we're talking about only the L or the D enantiomer of thalidomide, and I can't remember which is the one that causes this. But that's the problem, right? Because people were being given racemic mixtures of both the L and R enantiomer. Or only one was tested initially. Anyway, there'll be some way of specifically stating that the cause is only one version of that. But yeah, so you can kind of see how these things start now to link all up together. And so in the same way that Wikipedia is the prose human readable version of this information, Wikidata is the structured machine readable version of this information. Some areas are very well described. Some areas are not very well described. But talking about like things that HGAPS might eventually get involved in for people who aren't so into very public-facing infographics meant to be consumed by the general public. For people who are much more interested, like in, oh no, I just want to sit quietly somewhere and code in a corner, this is exactly the sort of thing that personality type could get involved in, that also has very large ongoing effects and very significant implications in terms of the way that all of this linked open data then connects up to other places.